into the online broadcast network, AFTERBUZZ TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads in over 150 countries, and your number one source for after-show entertainment. AFTERBUZZ TV, the destination for TV superfans. Producing after-shows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows. Interviewing celebrities and showrunners. And bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
I love that every single time.
I almost forgot how somber an opening our show has. Hello, fellow Fargo files. Welcome to the ABTV Fargo After Show. You can follow the network on all social media platforms at AfterBuzz TV. I am Lex Michael. I'm all over the internet at the Lex Michael. With me is
Dave Child. I'm all over the internets at MR Dave Child. And DaveChild.com. Check it out.
And so we are still playing catch up a little bit. So tonight we're talking about 2 episodes again. We're talking about season 2, episodes 3 and 4. That is The Myth of Sisyphus and Fear and Trembling.
Yep.
Wanted to, before we dive into plot and character and all of that juicy stuff that we like to talk about, wanted to touch on the titles of these episodes.
Yeah, in my research I discovered that they've basically been philosophy books this entire time. Or these 2 episodes specifically, The Myth of Sisyphus is a Camus book, and Fear and Trembling is a Kierkegaard. Now, The Myth of Sisyphus is about the Greek myth of the Sisyphus rolling that boulder up and kind of having it fall down. But the Camus book is specifically about how we can't look at it as a useless act, how the action of rolling the boulder is in itself something to be prideful for. So it's something like what your day-to-day job is what you should be happy about, not the result of it.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting with the actual show, because the show kind of focuses on, we talked about it before, about how it's always about the next day, you just get back to the job, or it's just about doing your job every single day. That sort of aspect to it. And I think that's kind of what the title is touching upon. And before that, the previous episode, episode 2, was called, what was it called? It was called Before the Law, which is based off of a Kafka story about someone trying to gain access to the law by going through a gate, and the gate saying, you can't get to the law just quite yet, you can't get to the law quite yet. And that's about when they went to the Gerhardts, when Lou went to the Gerhardts and tried to get in and became this whole other, world.
Sure.
Which actually kind of happened in this episode. That's right.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
I do think it's also worth noting that in the Greek myth, Sisyphus was punished and ended up having to push this boulder up a hill in this futile, laborious gesture because of his self-aggrandizing craftiness and deceitfulness, and that's why the king punished him. And I think it's also very appropriate that in that myth we see somebody who unwittingly set himself up for this punishment, for this fall. And I think that's something that could very directly apply to many of the characters in this season.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, and just the action of just trying to fight up against evil or something terrible happening against you and just kind of accepting that it's going to happen and getting back to it. I think could be that too. And Fear and Trembling is about Abraham killing his son Isaac, or being told by God to kill his son Isaac. And I think that touches in on themes itself with that episode, but maybe we should get to that when we
We'll get to that when we get to that. So the jumping off point in episode 3, which sparks most of the action in these 2 episodes, is there are finally fingerprints that are pulled from the gun at the Waffle House, Rye's gun that was discarded, that was found in, I believe, episode 2 by Betsy and was then turned over to Lou.
Yeah.
And now you have several entities operating their own independent hunts for Rye. And the only people at this point who know conclusively that Rye is dead are the Blomquists, who still have the damage to their car, and they've chopped him up in the grinder, and they're still trying to live their alibi. So when we open in episode 3, I believe, we see Dodd and his henchman Hansie. They're conducting their own search. Mike Milligan is conducting his own separate search for Rye. Dodd's daughter Simone tips off Hansie, and the two of them ambush Skip, the typewriter fellow.
Yes. Poor typewriting guy.
At Ride's, they ambush him at Ride's apartment, and they turn him over to Dodd. And Dodd, instead of saying, "Hey, daughter of mine, good job trying to help out your pop, find your uncle,"
right,
literally beats her for doing something without his say so.
Well, Dodd has that kind of old school mafia look of, the guys are the muscle, the girls are the ones that have to kind of sit back and just be girlish and mommy-ish and just kind of be the pure aspect of the family.
Right.
Which is why he didn't think his mom should be in charge, and it's why he doesn't think that his daughter should have any form of family business. And it's also why he's trying to get his nephew into the family business.
Yes.
Despite his brother's insistence that he doesn't.
Right.
Yeah.
So when Skip is turned over to Dodd and Hansie, they force him into this open grave, and they interrogate him as to Rye's whereabouts, and they discover pretty quickly he doesn't know anything.
Yeah.
And this poor guy, instead of
just letting him go,
they bury him in this open grave in hot asphalt, which...
Yeah. It was asphalt. I was trying to figure that out. It was asphalt.
I believe it was asphalt.
Yeah, I got the sense too because there was steam rising from it. And I kept thinking, if that turns into a road, they're going to have that problem of just having that one bump in the road and no one really knowing why.
Yeah.
And just being, it's a dead typewriting dude underneath there.
Dead typewriting. Yeah, and this poor Skip. And Skip was the first of what I assume will be several major casualties in the episodes to come. Poor Skip, rest in peace, we hardly knew ye.
Skip is also the character he's kind of the William H. Macy character and the Martin Freeman character from the first season of the businessman who's way over his head. And I find it interesting that in that season and in that movie, they spend the entire time looking at his downfall.
Sure.
This guy, Skip, just gets gone real quick.
Yeah.
Skip is he's not the focus of this sort of Fargo story.
Well, right, and I see the parallel for sure. And maybe if we'd gotten to spend more time with Skip, there would be more parallels there. But it is like the William H. Macy character or the Martin Freeman character, but without the inclination to do really bad things.
Yeah, well, he does. Except he does have that. He's the one that says he started this whole problem because he's the one that said go talk to the judge. And he was talking to someone who's just muscle, who's just mafia muscle.
True.
So he wasn't saying talk to the judge. He should have known that wasn't going to be, he wasn't going to actually have a debate with the judge and actually be able to work this out. He didn't have he wasn't an arbitrator he was talking to. He was talking to someone who's kind of a dim, trigger hand.
And with that one well-reasoned point, all of my sympathy for Skip is gone.
Yeah.
All right. So what happens immediately after that is that Dodd tells Hansie to do whatever is necessary to find Rye, beginning in Laverne. And Laverne is, of course, the stomping ground of the Solversons and the Blomqvist, and there will be some intersect a little bit later.
Hold on, are you calling him Hansie? Is it Hansie?
I believe it's Hansie.
I think it's just Hansie.
It could be Hansie.
I think I like how you're making up a little Scottish and Irish there. I think it's just Hansie.
Is it?
Yeah.
Where'd I get this O from?
I don't know, but I like it.
I'm gonna go.
You can keep it. I'll keep calling him Hansie, but you can call him Hansie.
I'm gonna call him Hansie.
Oh, Hansie.
And Hansie. So, all right, fine. Okay. So, I want to jump ahead, since we're going to keep talking about the Gerhardts. I want to jump ahead to the opening of episode 4, where we see this flashback of Otto, our friend Michael Hogan, bringing young Dodd to a meeting at a movie theater. And this is said in 1951, this flashback. And the movie theater... and it's, I believe, very noteworthy, is showing it's a fictional movie, but it's called Moonbase Freedom, and it stars Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, and it's actually, I think they actually use footage from something like Planet X, Journey to Planet X, something like that, an actual movie. So, but the fictional Ronald Reagan movie is what they're playing there, and they're tying more Ronald Reagan into this, and I find that interesting. I was reading something in my research that was kind of bringing up the theme of Ronald Reagan and what it might mean. And the opening to this whole show was in the episode called Waiting for Dutch, which is kind of a play off Waiting for Godot.
Yes.
And Dutch is a nickname of Reagan. And the idea, I think, is that the 70s is all about waiting for a hero to come and save them. They're waiting for someone to kind of come and take the reins and really like save America and turn it great again. They call it, in this episode, I think this episode, they call the 70s a hangover because the 60s was all about partying, and Mike Milligan, right?
Yes.
Mike Milligan calls like the 70s a hangover. And I think everyone's waiting for someone to take them out of that hangover. And Reagan is that promise. Reagan is that hero that's supposed to come. So he's kind of this, throughout this show, I think he's going to be this looming figure of this hero that could come in and save the day, but I think he never will. I'm getting ahead to kind of predictions, but I think there's an aspect of, that's why we see like a fictional movie starring Ronald Reagan. That's why the whole thing opens up with, we're about to see Ronald Reagan. We're waiting for him. He'll come.
Right.
And they named it after Waiting for Godot, which is a philosophical character that never shows up and
Right.
is basically God.
Well,
So,
and I think it's interesting that you have this idea, and I like this idea of Reagan as this benevolent figure that everybody's waiting on that never arrives,
Right.
because we're seeing it's so much more than I would have thought after the first episode or two. We're seeing a lot of UFO stuff,
yeah.
juxtaposed sometimes with Reagan, but I think it's interesting that you have on the one side, like you say, Reagan, the benevolent figure that is looming out there somewhere that may or may not show up.
Yeah.
You also have this idea of extraterrestrials, this potentially malevolent force that is the equal. I guess I'm suggesting that extraterrestrials and Ronald Reagan are equal and opposing forces.
The exact opposites. Yes, yeah.
This malevolent force that may never actually fully appear.
Well, and we never really know what they are, because even there's that truck stop guy that talks about like aliens, and even he doesn't say they're definitely
The one that Lou bumps into.
Yeah, he says they could probe, or they could just be zookeepers, or they could be all sorts of things. The one interesting character, and I know like this is kind of going back to episode 3 before we get to 4, I think, is Hansie. I wanted to talk a little bit more about Hansie.
Episode 4, some of the Hansie stuff is fascinating, directly in relation to what we're talking about. But
now remind me, in episode 4, is that when he's going through the Waffle House? Is that episode 4 or 3?
I believe that's in episode 4. When he's out in the parking lot, and we're going to jump around a little bit anyway.
Right.
But I believe it's in the 4th episode where he's looking for clues and he sees the blood stains outside in the snow. He finds the broken glass, and then there's that light.
There's
in the sky.
light in the sky, and there's also, and then he sees the light in the sky, and then he checks his watch, which I think is important. Because
Is it almost alien time?
Yeah, well, this is what I saw. Maybe it's also because I'm also kind of binge watching X-Files right now.
Me too.
But something that Mulder always does, whenever there's like
the 9 minutes
alien thing, he always checks his watch to see if there's been a lost time.
Yep.
So I don't know if he's checking his watch because like, oh, it's 12 o'clock, it's alien time. That's just when they come. Or it's, oh, this is when that instant thing that happens that kind of looks like aliens happens. Or if he's actually looking for lost time. And he's interesting too because his flashback that begins episode 3 is perplexing. And I'm not quite sure where they were going with it. And it's one where he's episode 3 starts off where Hansie's in the woods holding a rabbit and kind of caressing the rabbit. And then it flashes back to when he's a student and he's watching a magic act. And then he goes back and he kills the rabbit.
Yep.
So like I'm wondering if there's, I think it's touching upon also a theme of the idea that there could be magic out there and there could be something out there.
Sure.
But in the end, Hansie's character at least sees it as not being real or not being possible.
Or there's a look that's on his face when he sees the light. He checks his watch. I think it's totally worth considering that maybe he doesn't believe in it at all, but I'm also wondering, is it possible he believes it, he accepts it, and it just doesn't concern him all that much?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. And he also has a moment in this episode, jumping ahead a little bit, where it's revealed that he's someone who came back from Vietnam himself. He's someone who brought the war back, which is probably why he's one of the hardest characters there. He's one of the characters that has like who's able to do his job, focus. He's more of a soldier than I think anyone else in the Gerhardt
Sure.
like aspect of it. And he talked about how to he talked about when he was looking at when he went to go to the car shop.
That's and we can go directly to that because after he finds the clues or potential clues, and he sees the lights in the sky at the parking lot at the Waffle House, he spots the car. He spots Peggy's banged up car in the garage, and so he goes to investigate, and he matches the glass that he finds in the parking lot to the broken headlight. And then he bumps into the mechanic.
He bumps into the mechanic whose name is
Sonny, I believe.
Sonny. And by the way, Sonny and Nick Offerman's character,
Carl Weathers,
they are direct homages to Big Lebowski. By the way, I did find this out that Noah, the showrunner, talks about how they're John Goodman and Steve Buscemi.
I can see it.
Yeah, they're those two characters kind of set in the Fargoverse kind of version of that, which you could definitely see because they're like Nick Offerman's character is the veteran that comes back, but he's more of a goofy blowhard than he is like an actual tough guy.
Sure.
You get the sense maybe he didn't actually go to war. I kind of get that vibe from him. But anyways, Hansie talks about also I love how when he shows his gun. Okay, I'll get to that. When Hansie, what's his name? Sonny?
Sonny. Yeah.
Sonny. He starts threatening Sonny, and he talks about his experience in war, which is pretty serious, and it sounds like he came back really a changed, dark soul from that, and explains why he's a soldier. And then when Nick Offerman's character comes out, Carl, he threatens him to go, and he shows his gun, and his gun is over here with the handle pointed. It's on his left side with the handle pointed out, which means he's probably a right-handed guy, and he put it there so he can cross his body to get the gun and pull it out, which means he does not know how to hold a gun.
You don't want to cross.
He does not. That takes up so much time. I only fired a gun once when I was 10 years old and as a Boy Scout, and I know enough that that's not where you put a gun if you want to quickly shoot someone.
I've seen a bunch of westerns. I get it.
Yeah. We've all known Ronald Reagan in our times. So we get that experience, and then at this point Hansie is knows he's ahead of everyone as far as figuring out what actually happened to Rye.
Yep.
So he goes back. Where are we now? In kind of
we can follow Hansie because there's really only I think one more significant bit with Hansie in these two episodes, and it's he manages to find the Blomquist house, and he goes through the fireplace, and he finds among the ashes and the charred remains of clothing, he finds Rye's belt buckle.
Right, he does. And during this, right on his trail is Lou.
Yes, and
should we move to Lou?
We're going to circle back. I want to finish. Okay. I want to wrap things up with the Gerhardts really quickly. We find out that Mike Milligan and Simone Gerhardt are sleeping together. Mm-hmm. They discuss. That's important. They discuss potentially having to kill Dodd.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, Dodd has it coming.
Yeah, Dodd is okay. So this is one thing I wanted to talk because you were talking about the flashback.
Yes.
Where we see Dodd as a kid. Who, while they're watching the movie, we didn't even touch about this. While they're watching the movie, the main mafia guy of Fargo, because we're in Fargo, right? And gets knifed in the back of the head by a young Dodd.
Well, and it's also worth mentioning this unnamed man who Otto is meeting with talks about how he, if I'm not mistaken, he killed Otto's father.
Right.
In an attempt to take control of their territory, and now the plan is, you're here, we're going to kill you too.
That's true. And we see Otto really go full gangster and just kill everyone. And this is important, I think, because we get a sense of that Floyd is really not just a continuation of Otto. If anyone's a continuation of Otto, because we never really got to see Otto rule.
Right.
We just saw Otto, I almost said drool, which is terrible. We just saw Otto have a stroke. No drooling involved. And we didn't. This is the first time we see him as a boss, and we see that Dodd is actually a continuation of Otto.
Yes.
If they really wanted someone like Otto on the throne, then it would be Dodd, and Floyd is the almost exact opposite.
Right.
So we know for sure when Floyd says to Joe when they're having their talk, "You'll be happy it's me," because if it was Otto sitting here, he would have shot you when you first came in.
Yep.
And we know that's true because of that flashback.
Well, it's something else that she says, and I want to touch on this meeting with Kansas City in more detail, but something else, she alludes to having a firstborn son who went to war and was killed.
Right.
And I think that's interesting because to me it shades Dodd a little bit differently as well, because in the first 2 episodes, at least I was operating, perhaps foolishly, but I was operating in the absence of any other information, that Dodd is the firstborn.
I think he actually says he's the oldest.
He's the oldest. He's the oldest remaining, certainly.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to me that he had an older brother,
right,
who would have presumably been quote unquote heir to that throne.
Yeah, and that's perfect because we also see how Vietnam has shaped every single person, including the Gerhardts, which seem to be a country on their own selves. Yep. They're a sovereign nation. They don't seem to be a part of America in a lot of ways. So
the Gerhardts sit down with Joe Bulo and the Kansas City Syndicate, and Floyd proposes, we don't have to go to war, we can share territory. And she floats an offer, and they part after this initial meeting saying, we'll consider it. What ends up happening is Kansas City sends Mike Milligan and the Kitchen Brothers to a doctor's office where Otto Gerhardt and some Gerhardt crew members they're leaving. They're transporting Otto away from this doctor's office, and Milligan and the Kitchen Brothers just open fire on everybody around Otto. They kill every Gerhardt crew member there, and they leave poor, stroked out Otto alone in his wheelchair in the parking lot. Yeah.
Which, by the way, great acting job.
Oh yeah,
from Otto there.
Michael Hogan.
Yeah, Michael Hogan. He's he's a stroke victim, yet he's capturing so much with this sneer that he just has this grimace and his eyes.
Well, and you can tell mentally Otto's still there. He knows exactly what's happening, but his body is not responding to the mental signals anymore because of the stroke. He's physically debilitated, but he knows exactly what's happening.
There's a chance that he could get out of this and then become another force that has to that takes back control, but I'm not too sure. Anyways,
so after this happens, the Gerhardts meet with Kansas City again, and Joe Bulo says, "You know what? We decided we're rejecting your offer. We're lowering our price, and anything less than total surrender from you, and we're going to wipe every Gerhardt off the face of the earth."
Yeah, and there's also one important thing that happens during that meeting, because one thing that happened before this was that Dodd, before they had this meeting, before they had any sort of talk about hey, we don't have to go to war, he did something a lot like his dad, where he went and attacked 2 members of the Kansas City group.
Yeah, 2 of Bulo's men at this coffee shop, and it seemed like they bumped into each other completely by happenstance.
I don't think so. I think he went after him.
Yeah?
I think he went to that coffee shop with his nephew in order to beat them up, in order to kind of show a sign of muscle, because that's all Dodd really knows and responds to. He's just a force of violence. So I think he went there to kind of be I'm going to show that I can take over the throne.
Sure.
By actually showing some muscle. That's why he beats him up and then casually orders a donut.
Right, that moment was in all the trailers for season 2.
Yeah. It's just it's a pretty badass moment. It's a good moment. But what happens there is Joe talks to Floyd and says, "Listen, he's retaliated. The only thing you could do if you don't want to go to war is punish your son, but he's your son. You're not going to do that."
Right.
Which is interesting, because I think that's the whole point of naming this episode Fear and Trembling, because Fear and Trembling is all about the Kierkegaard story. Kierkegaard talking about the anxiety Abraham must have had to kill his son Isaac.
Sure.
And instead of Floyd actually listening to the gods and what should be right, and Kansas City, and actually punishing her kid, because she could have just killed Dodd. She could have, if she wasn't a mom, he's kind of right.
And who knows, if it was Otto, maybe Otto would have.
Yeah, maybe if Otto was around. But even if it was Hansie that did this or something, she probably would have killed the guy.
Right.
And then sent him to Kansas City. And there's that sweet moment right after that they're given that choice of either, accept our offer or go to war, where you see Dodd for the first time be a gentle flower and just
it's the moment in the back of the car.
Where
he puts his mother's hand on his face, and for a minute Floyd pulls it away.
Yeah, she just won't touch her son, and that she's trying to separate herself as a mom there and try to be the boss of this group, but she just can't do it. She has to she just has to be a mom and accept him, and because of that, they go to war.
Yeah,
I mean, it's gonna cause a lot more bloodshed than just like killing off Dodd and sending. Because in the mafia world, that would probably be the easiest, most right thing to do, is just kill off Dodd.
It would be the quickest and the simplest.
Right. So, anyways, that's kind of, I think, where Fear and Trembling come from. That's what's behind it.
And that is more or less for these 2 episodes where we leave the Gerhardts. At the end of episode 4, Bear and Dodd go to ask Floyd, what is the plan going to be? And she tells them we're going to war.
Yeah, we know that war is on the horizon.
So, all right, I want to jump over to Lou Solverson.
Good.
So, Lou, Betsy, Hank, this family unit, they're all grouped together. Hank, in episode 3, I believe, encounters Betsy at the salon. And Betsy, within earshot of Peggy, floats this theory about how Rye could have been the victim of a hit and run.
Right.
And I think it's wonderful. Again, we saw it in the second episode where she is the one that finds the gun. But hearing Betsy piece this together on her own and pitch it to her sheriff father.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful that Betsy is every bit the police officer, every bit the detective that the men in her life are, if not more so, because nobody put that together. And in fact, Peggy freaks out when she hears this, because obviously that's what happened. And she discredits. She says, "No, that's crazy. Why wouldn't the driver say something? Why wouldn't the driver stop?" So on and so forth. And
basically says, why would a someone just drive back to their house and just make dinner?
Right.
Which is exactly what happened.
And Hank goes, well, you know what? I'm inclined to agree with Betsy here. Or not Betsy, I'm sorry, Peggy. I'm inclined to agree with Peggy here. And for the time being, that gets dropped.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Lou...
I do want to say one thing about that scene.
Oh, yeah.
Because there is... this is actually the first time I was a little worried with... I don't know. There's, when we first start watching Fargo, everyone's worried that it's just going to be fan fiction, or it's just something that's like, I really love this show and I want it to be a little bit like the movie. This is actually the first time we hear something that was, I think, in the initial movie, where Hank says it just casually, but it's a famous line that Margot says, which is like, why would they even do that? Just for a little bit of money?
Yeah.
Which is from Margot's famous monologue that she has, very moving moment, and Hank kind of says it just off the cuff.
Sure.
It just kind of happens, and I got actually a little worried at that moment, because I'm like, are they just gonna put, I don't know, lines from Fargo in every now and then just to be like, get it? But I think that only happened once, and they saved it. And yeah, and I think it's also important. You were talking about this, that Betsy, says this because it's important that Fargo always has that strong female character.
Yes.
And even if in the 70s that was more behind the guy, but it's still she's still there and influencing her daughter, obviously.
Yes.
Which is great. Okay. So
yeah, well, and we do have, I mean, I would argue, even if her command is temporary, I would argue Floyd is probably one of the most powerful characters on the show. She's just not a force for good in the world.
That's true. Floyd is probably the most interesting character in the show.
Yeah.
Just because, she's the matriarch is just...
Which, by the way, now that they're going to war, I'm very, very scared for Floyd. But we'll talk about that.
Okay.
So Lou visits the Gerhardt farm and has a tense standoff with the entire family, essentially. After that, he goes to the typewriter store.
I want to also talk about, on the way there, he meets Ben Schmidt.
Yes.
Which is, he meets Ben Schmidt in the office of the judge.
Yes.
That's when he meets, the typewriter guy who's being all squirrely.
Yeah, before he gets buried in asphalt,
Yeah.
he sees Skip behaving very strangely at the judge's office.
But this isn't actually the first time we've met Ben Schmidt, because Ben Schmidt was in season 1 of Fargo. Ben Schmidt was the boss of Colin Hanks, who was just kind of barking orders at him. And at one point, Lou says...
You're blowing my mind right now.
Well, it's true. And at one point, Lou says, I've met Ben Schmidt. I don't really like him. Or something along that lines. He doesn't... You get the sense they have a past history together.
Yeah.
And that he doesn't like Ben Schmidt. And this is the young Ben Schmidt.
I did not remember that at all from season 1.
Yeah, it's there. And what happens also that's important is when they go to the Gerhardts, it's law flips. It becomes a different country. Ben Schmidt doesn't even like warn Lou about this. They just go in, and the Gerhardts come out and say, like, all right, give us your guns, policemen. And the policemen just give them up, except for Lou. Lou's the only one.
I gotta tip my hat to Patrick Wilson and his performance
so good.
in these episodes, the last ones too. These episodes especially, because he is so pure and he is so good. But in that scene especially, he doesn't so much as blink.
Yeah, I love the line that he says, I'm sorry if I should be terrified of you right now, and something. But like that, just that moment of like, I'm sorry if I should be terrified of you right now, shows that he's in a whole nother world. He's not in the Gerhardt like country. He doesn't know the rules here. They're totally separate, and I just love that moment.
This is just looking directly into Dodd's eyes and giving him not the slightest bit of...
Dodd admits, like, hey, why would we kill a judge? We're paying them all. Just in front of police officers.
Yep.
It just doesn't matter. It's just so separate. They're not part of the normal law and government.
Yep, so. And Lou knows who the Gerhardts are. He knows these people are bad news, and he knows just how bad news they are.
Right.
And he still won't even give him an inch.
Yeah,
he just stares.
He just
He won't do anything that's going to get him or other police officers killed in that moment. But
but he did say, like, hey, if they keep their arms drawn here, I'm going to have to start shooting. And he doesn't want to do it. It's a politeness,
right?
But he's still offering it, which is important because of what happens at the typewriting.
Which right? Almost immediately he finds himself in another standoff when he goes to the typewriter store. And at this point, Skip is gone. Skip's certainly not there. Mike Milligan and the Kitchen Brothers, however, are there. They're also conducting their own search, looking for their own clues. And I love, I don't know if you noticed, one of the two Kitchen Brothers comes out of the bathroom and he's holding a UFO magazine.
Oh, really? I did not notice that.
You remember last week when we were talking, I said I would love if the reveal at the end is that the Kitchen Brothers and Mike Milligan are from outer space.
Right.
I'm clinging hard to the idea that the Kitchen Brothers are aliens.
I don't think they're aliens.
I don't think they are, but I want them to be.
Also, I do want to say, because one of the best lines from the episode is when he says, oh, it's Mike Milligan and the Kitchen Brothers. He says, you make us sound like a prog rock band.
A prog rock band, yep.
Someone make that shirt. Someone make that prog rock album cover of Mike Milligan and the Kitchen Brothers. Or just that album cover. I just need that shirt where it's just the three of them just posing kind of like in that prog rock kind of style, that 80s like.
Well, it would be exactly what
70s.
It would be exactly what you're picturing, but then the two Kitchen Brothers, each with their shotguns, flanking Mike Milligan, who'll have a pistol in each hand, and they'll be posing the way you're describing.
Right. I think actually Mike Milligan wouldn't. He would just have.
He would just have his hands out,
or he'll do like the I am not a crook.
Yes,
crook moment. That would be perfect.
So then, shortly after that, Lou has the encounter with the trucker that you mentioned, who brings up the visitors from outer space again.
Before we move on too quickly from that, because Mike Milligan also says something that I think is a big theme of the show that we've talked about in the last episode. That idea that it's politeness versus evil, or it's just the idea of being proper versus evil. And because he says like, no, you guys aren't nice. You guys are just proper. You guys are polite.
You're pretty polite about it, yeah.
Like I should be thanking you for like being so unfriendly.
Right.
You know, you're very just polite and proper. And I think that's a moment to just mention, because I think it's a big part of why Fargo is so interesting and why all these characters are so interesting, and to see all this evil kind of infect this world, because everyone's so proper and polite.
And it's that Minnesota nice, and then right under that veneer of decency and politeness is all this darkness.
Yeah. It's perfect.
So we find out Betsy and Lou are talking to a doctor. We find out that Betsy's condition is worsening.
To the worst doctor ever.
He does not have very good bedside manner at all.
He has really bad bedside manner. He's just, the entire time it's like, well, I guess you would like say they're just not good.
Yeah.
It's not good. Oh, and I should tell you about what a placebo is so flippantly.
He brings up this drug trial as one possible course of action, but his pitch is not spectacular. But at this point, what options do they have?
Yeah, they have no other choice but to take this 50-50. Like, we could be giving you an actual experimental drug that might even not do anything in itself.
Right. And we of course we can't tell you whether you have the placebo or the real thing, because that would defeat the purpose of the study.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see that nice tension in the family afterwards, when they're back at the house. There's that moment where she says, "I'm going to go take my sugar pill," and Lou's like, "No, I think it's the one. I think you're taking the drug." And she says, "Do you think that because you hope it, or do you actually think that?"
Right.
And there's that nice moment. She's the logic. She's like a big logical part of the family, and I think it's a good balance, and it's also why she was able to see through a lot of the police work that the actual police aren't doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Hank and Lou meet with Sonny and Carl Weathers, and the two of them, Sonny and Carl, relate this incident with Hansie.
Yeah.
And they point out the damage to the car, and Lou's looking at the car, and then he has this epiphany.
Yeah, he flashes back to when he was in the butcher shop and acting and like talking to Ed, right? It's Ed?
Yep.
Yeah, talking to Ed and seeing all the tells that Ed had, seeing all the like moments of squirreliness and strangeness that Ed actually had at that moment. Not answering the phone, just like, not wanting him to get inside the shop itself.
Yep.
And he was able to really quickly piece it together.
He just needed that one little piece to make the light flip on. And so he goes right to the Blomquist.
Yeah.
And we'll circle back around to that. I do want to talk a little bit about the Blomquist up until that conversation in their home.
Yeah, that's a good way of doing it.
So obviously, Peggy overheard Betsy pitch this theory about the hit and run to Hank, was able to dispel it in the room, say, okay, no, that couldn't have happened, it doesn't make any sense, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then goes, oh crap, and goes to Ed and has Ed crash her car again to cover up the damage.
Yeah, but, in typical Fargo fashion, I think the first crash doesn't quite work.
Right.
The whole car flips around and hits him in the back bumper, and so they have to do it again. Which is a big tell for Lou later on when he's like, wait, this doesn't make sense. They also backed up here and they hit it front. Something's squirrely.
I also love Jesse Plemons. I think I got the
whiplash.
The whiplash.
Yeah.
And you find out too, not that we weren't already pretty keyed into this, but you see things are not copacetic in the Blomquist marriage by any stretch. As far as Ed is concerned, they're still trying to conceive a baby, and meanwhile Peggy's still taking birth control. Just for example.
Yeah. Well, he's trying to be the 50s, 60s husband. That's what he wants. In an interview I saw with the showrunner, he talks about the good thing about setting in 75. It also means each character, they're set in the 70s, but they're also set in the 60s.
Yep.
They're also set in the 50s, depending on where their mindset is. And with Ed, he's very much set in like the 60s, 50s sort of proper. I'm gonna have that shop. I'm gonna like have a business. We're gonna have a family. And his wife is not. She's trying to find her place in the world, but not knowing quite what it is. And she's also very, very full of denial and very full of like not empathetic at all.
Right.
Like she's someone that they're both actually, I think, lacking some empathy, because Ed is trying to just go forward and not think that his view of the world is the same view as hers, while like she's trying to become a better person and takes money from the account to create this like. That
was the next thing that I wanted to touch on.
Yeah.
Is that Ed goes to make the down payment on the butcher shop that is to be his. That's what he wants his life to be, is to take over this business. He goes, he hands over the check, comes to find out the check bounced. And Bud, who's currently running the shop, he says, well, your check bounced, and I'm really looking at this other offer, but I'll give you until Friday to make this right and see if you can come up with the money, which, by the way, we know that means that between now and Friday, Ed's going to do something real stupid.
Oh, that's true. That's true. In like the Fargo world,
tends
to happen.
When you get that time frame set and the desperation sets in, there's no way Ed's not going to do something exceedingly dumb.
Right, maybe. I don't know about that, because we also have the heat kind of breathing down his neck. And I do want to talk about that moment for a second before we move on to what happens in their house, which is where we're going. But like, because that's the first time that check bouncing is the first time their actual trajectories kind of butt heads.
And it's not just, oh, we don't have the money, we wrote a bad check. It's, we had the money.
Yeah.
But Peggy went and spent it on this LifeSpring retreat.
Yeah. Just to better herself and not better the family. But at the same time, Ed is someone who's trying to, and we can't just put it on her, because at the same time, Ed's trying to buy the store and make his family of what he thinks his family should be, and not really asking her what she wants either.
Right.
So, but both of them are just like blindly going towards this moment where they just don't connect because the check bounces. And
Ed confronts Peggy about this, and Peggy goes to her friend Constance, who's been pushing this retreat so far so aggressively, and says, "I need the money back." And of course, Constance says, "Well, you can't get the money back." So
easily talks her out of it. Too.
We're agreed that this is a scam, right?
Well, I don't know if it's a scam. I don't know if it's a scam or if it's just like, because Constance is obviously interested in Peggy. So sexually. So like, I'm wondering if this retreat is really
just an excuse to get Peggy off somewhere.
Yeah, and also it could be a retreat full of people much like Constance who are interested in other ladies.
Sure.
So it could just be like, I think Constance is working on her own self-interest. It's not so much a scam, but it's
there's definitely more to her intentions than you need to do this for you and be the best you can be.
Also, the 70s was full of that, like everyone going on retreats, everyone trying to better themselves in that sort of sense. So it's like, it's probably as much of a scam as that is in general.
Sure.
But I think it's there. And she's easily talked out of it by Constance. She doesn't, well, I don't get a sense that she's actually going to try and get that money back.
No.
After that. So.
No, I don't think there's that money's not coming back.
No.
So, which is why before Friday, Ed's going to have to do something, and that's why I believe, especially in the Fargo verse, Ed does something. It probably doesn't end particularly well for Eddie.
Yeah, unless Ed has stopped even before Friday. Unless something happens.
So to that point, we touched on Hansie poking around the Blomquist house, finding the belt buckle. Lou arrives at the Blomquist house after Hansie's out of there. They're not home yet. He waits for him.
Right.
They show up.
Do we actually see Hansie leave?
I don't remember off the top of my head if we see him leave.
Do. I'm going to rewatch it to double check this, but I feel like we don't see him leave, so there is the added tension of not knowing if Hansie is still in the house during that whole discussion, during that whole moment when Lou comes in and faces them.
Right.
Because they get a knock on the door, Lou shows up, and it's the first time where law enforcement is actually revealing that they know what's happening.
Right.
And there's a fantastic speech. And I know I do have to say, usually in a show like this, like in True Detective or something, there's sometimes a sense of whenever someone goes back to, keeps returning to the theme of a war that kind of destroyed everyone, a war that brought in evil, a war that changed people. Usually it's kind of tiring when they go back to it. But this speech is an example of them. They've already had about 2 or 3 speeches about the war, but this is still a great speech, and it's still Lou's speech about I saw denial. I saw what denial in the face of a dying man looks like, and that's what you two look like. You look like dying men that are just full of denial.
Yeah.
And that's so powerful, because I haven't heard writing like that in a very long time, because it wasn't even like you guys look like you are dying, or it's 2 separate things are going on there of denial and dying. And he's trying to explain to them that what they're doing is far more dangerous than spending their life in prison.
And that's the thing. At this point, he's put it together. He knows that they hit Rye. Both of them hit Rye with the car.
Yeah.
That's where Rye went.
He doesn't have enough to actually arrest them.
No, but he knows. He makes it clear. And they know that he knows now because of how direct he is about it. And they stick to their story.
Yeah, and Ed almost comes out and says it. There's a moment where I think he's about to admit it, and then it's Peggy that says no, and kind of.
Well, and also midway through this conversation, Ed notices that the fireplace screen has been moved.
Right.
and it wigs him out, as it should, because that means like he knows Lou didn't do that. Lou was outside till they got home.
Yeah.
That tells him in that moment, and it's communicated entirely non-verbally because he can't show his hand, someone was here.
Right.
Someone else knows.
Yeah.
And so, Lou pushes as much as he can without, what's he going to do? He can only be as direct as he can be, and they stick to their story. And when he pushes just a little bit more, Peggy says, essentially, you're making me very uncomfortable. No offense, but you should leave. And Lou puts it as bluntly as he can without saying, if you do this, you're going to die. He basically tells them the Gerhardts hurt people for money.
Yeah.
And they're coming. They may already be here. And as he leaves, he tells them to lock their doors.
Yeah.
And then he goes. Because what else can he do?
Right. Right. It's the approaching storm that's about to happen, because this episode was all about, like, I read a New York Times review on this episode and they called it Winter is Coming, even though like it's always winter in Fargo, but it feels like there's something down the line the storm is about to hit. We got war on the horizon. The Gerhardts know the Blomquists are involved and probably have killed. They basically know they killed Rye because of that belt buckle.
That's once Hansie goes back to Dodd and says, "Hey, look what I found."
Yeah,
they know that's one way or another. That's where the trail ends.
Right. So what? I guess predictions now, right?
Yeah, why not? I think we covered everything major. We've got a few minutes left. Yeah, let's jump into predictions really quickly.
And now,
I love the light show.
AFTERBUZZ TV.
And look, they're like wintry blue colors.
Ooh, this is the first time I've experienced this.
Yeah.
This is great.
This is exciting.
Ooh, this is like the aliens from Fargo are visiting. Oh, okay.
So,
predictions. So, what do you think? What do you think Ed's going to do if you think he's going to do something stupid?
I'm not entirely sure. I think especially now that we know, okay, the Gerhardts and Kansas City are going to war. We know that the law enforcement's going to get involved. We know that now the Blomquists are tied directly. The law's looking at them. We know the Gerhardts are going to be looking at them. I honestly, I have no specific earthly idea.
Well, the only thing that he could maybe do is rob the beauty place. But like, I feel like he won't do it. I don't know. It's that kind of. I see where the logic is that he's about to do something stupid in that sense, but I just don't know. I don't know what it actually could be,
right?
Or where he could actually like move forward to. I think so. There's going to be an all-out war between them,
and we know that. More than likely, pretty soon, characters are going to start being offed violently.
Yeah, I think you were saying how you were afraid of Floyd.
I'm very afraid for Floyd.
I think Floyd's going to survive. Yeah? I don't think the rest of her family is. And that's why... Because think of the worst possible outcome for Floyd.
Is losing her sons and her grandchildren. And yeah.
And just like losing everyone around. I think there's also... the beginning of the series where it's the massacre at Sioux Falls, where it's like the U.S. coming in and sweeping out native people and the kind of the tribe that's there. I think the Gerhardts are that tribe in a way. So, and I think Kansas City is kind of an aspect of that, people coming out and sweeping out.
That is a really interesting parallel.
Yeah. So I don't think
this, by the way, internet, is why you get Mr. Dave Child on your podcast. Yeah. Because he can say things like that and make your mind go ooh.
So I think that's an aspect of. I think that's the Gerhardts are not going to come out of this looking pretty. I think that's almost a definite.
I think no matter whether or not there are any Gerhardts actually left standing, I don't think there is a Gerhardt criminal syndicate operating in Fargo anymore.
I also want to touch upon the fact that I did hear in my research that Bruce Campbell definitely is going to be coming through Fargo as President Reagan. This is my prediction. I don't think he's going to do very much. I think
it's just going to be quick in, quick out.
I think there's going to be a big buildup at some point about like Reagan's coming, Reagan's coming, and then it's just going to be like him waving in the past, and it's not going to affect the story at all. We think he's going to save the story, and it's going to tie everything together. I don't think he's going to do anything. I think that's another reason why the episode begins with everyone waiting for Reagan and he just doesn't show up.
And he doesn't show up and doesn't help them.
Because he's that hero that just doesn't actually help.
And while I agree that actually would make the most sense based on the thematic framing that you've suggested tonight, I am still holding out hope. The possibility, maybe they'll do an like an Inglourious Basterds style alternate version of history, and we'll get Space Reagan.
Space Reagan.
I really want Space Reagan.
Space Reagan. Bruce Campbell's Reagan fighting aliens.
Bruce Campbell and the Reagan Space Armada fighting Mike Milligan and the Kitchen Brothers in the stars, and that's the finale.
Right.
And nobody down on Earth knows or believes it. They see the lights in the sky, and they have to embrace the mystery.
Yeah, if he does shoot the Kitchen Brothers in the face, I hope in a Bruce Campbell fashion he says, "I'm taking everything, including the kitchen sink." That's my hope.
I more or less on the same page. I just hope it happens on a spaceship.
Yeah, I mean, what is with the spaceships?
I don't think we're gonna find out.
I think it's going to be something because they keep bringing it back. I would say it's like maybe not going to be anything if we see it just once. There's going to be some parallel, even if it's just the paranoia of the time where everyone doesn't trust the government anymore, and the aliens represent that distrust. But so something is going to happen. Something just is going to we might not get a good explanation, but there's going to be a little button with an alien.
And it could also just be to touch on, more seriously, just to touch on some of the thematic stuff that you've been talking about. It could just represent that thing that is always there, that is bigger than us, that is ominous as hell, that we can't control, and we don't know if or when it's coming for us, but it's out there.
Yeah. Space Reagan.
Space Reagan.
Space Reagan.
And I think that's going to do it for us on this Fargo after
Space
show.
Reagan, yes.
I think every week I'm going to try and end on Space Reagan.
Right.
So yeah, that's going to do. Mr. Dave Child, where can people find you on the internet?
At Mr. Dave Child and DaveChild.com.
Yes, and you can find me all over the internety, webby things. My handle everywhere is at the Lex Michael. Thank you guys for joining us. Tune in next week. We're going to be talking about 2 more episodes 5 and 6. I'm very excited to see characters we like get killed off in violent fashions.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. See you next week.
Bye.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later!
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.